Hello, and thank you for joining me for Story Time with Mr. C. I am Mr. C, and for those of you who are returning for yet another episode, thank you so much for sticking with me, and welcome back. For those of you tuning in for the first time, welcome. If you like what you hear, please go back and check out my first two episodes. Here on Storytime with Mr. C, I will be sharing stories that I have written, or a friend or family member has written, or maybe even something you have written. If you would like for me to share one of your stories here on Storytime with Mr. C, get your story or your stories ready to go and stay tuned. I hope to have more info on that in the next week or two. Big thank you to my buddy Russ for helping me out with my intro music. Please go check out Russ and his band Drive By High Five at Your Mom's House Bar and Grill, right here in Tucson, Arizona on Camino Seco, just south of Broadway. They will be playing Wednesday of this week. That's July 23rd at 7 p.m. I hope to see you there. Also, big thanks to Ben over at Chasing the Whimsy. You can find the link to his podcast down in the description. Please go check it out. Show him some love. Thank you again, Ben, for your continued support. For this, our third episode, I will be sharing the next chapter from my stories about my father. And while I do have many more of these I intend to share, please keep in mind that not all of my stories will be autobiographical in nature. That's just what I'm doing right now. I will be sharing some of my mother's stories, some of her mother's stories, and possibly even some of her mother's stories. I come from a long line of storytellers. I will also be sharing some fictionalized stories of horror and suspense as we move forward, because that's more my jam. And who knows what other stories will pop up. So please, stay tuned for all of that good stuff. All right, folks, enough babbling for now. Here we go with episode 3. Stand by.
Storytime with Mr. C. Storytime.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of Storytime with Mr. C. This is the next chapter in my collection of stories I wrote about my father. This is The Barbershop, Part 3, of Toes and Water Heaters, from Father Allen. Right next door to the barbershop was a furniture store, or maybe it was an antique store. Either way, it was full of furniture. And it was owned by the Bacigalupi family. I don't remember Mr. Bacigalupi being around, but I do remember Mrs. Bacigalupi, mostly because she read me stories. I remember sitting in a dimly lit room, surrounded by richly colored furniture that I wasn't allowed to touch, my nostrils filled with the smells of furniture polish and mothballs, as I listened to the exploits of Alice, the Mad Hatter, and the White Rabbit. That book confused the hell out of me, but I still loved it, especially because she was reading it to me. The Bacigalupis had 2 sons. One of them was my age, and the other was my sister's age, so a couple years older. I don't recall playing with the 2 of them very often, but on occasion our paths would cross. On one of those occasions, I was finding myself bored in the barbershop, so I asked my father if I could go outside to play. "As long as you don't go out back," was his reply. I remember that very clearly. Now, being a typical 5-year-old boy, what was I supposed to do? I sprinted out of the shop, around the building, and directly to the back. The back was typically off limits to me because of the danger factor, which is exactly why I needed to go there. It ran the entire length of the strip mall and butted up against the back gates of some of the adjacent neighborhood houses. This was where delivery trucks belched their delivery truck exhaust fumes, where piles of garbage were left to rot until collection day, and where miscellaneous pieces of unwanted crap were stored until further notice. In the early spring of my 4th year of life, one of these unwanted pieces of crap was the old 80-gallon commercial water heater that had recently been removed from the barbershop to make way for a shiny brand new one that never arrived. As I came around the building, I found the Bacigalupi brothers busily rolling the humongous water heater to and fro across the asphalt. They suddenly got excited and explained to me that it was a good thing I showed up when I did. It was very important that they get this water heater thing standing up, and I was needed as a lookout, in case any nosy adults showed up. After much grunting and heaving, the two boys were somehow able to get the water heater upright. The boys rejoiced at their amazing talent and strength, and I clapped enthusiastically to show my approval, but I couldn't help thinking that something was terribly wrong. I stepped forward to inspect the resurrected metal monolith and realized that while they had indeed succeeded in raising the beast, the idiots had it upside down. "Hey, you guys," was about all that got out of my mouth before everything went to Poop City. The water heater groaned in protest and then began leaning towards me. The two boys were both much bigger than I was, but there was no way in hell they were going to change this thing's mind about where it wanted to go. It had performed its many years of service, heating water to a suitable temperature, and now expected its rest, preferably on its side. The Bacigalupi brothers could do nothing but stare in horror as their new toy continued its journey in my general direction. I shuffled backwards in a desperate yet feeble attempt at escape, but the deadly appliance demanded its prize. And with a sound that will echo through my ears until my death, the 80-gallon commercial water heater crashed to the ground directly in front of me, my left foot falling prey to its mass. Having apparently satisfied its lust for blood, my attacker creaked once and slowly rolled off of my mangled foot. The Bacigalupi boys proceeded to flee in terror as I began to howl in pain. I hobbled around the building, racked with sobs, tears cascading down my tiny, filthy face. I dragged myself into the barbershop and cried out for my father, who was busy at work behind his chair. He immediately left his customer and rushed to my side as I flopped into one of the red vinyl waiting chairs. Between sobs, I somehow choked out enough syllables to make him understand that something horrible had happened to my foot. He carefully removed my shoe, and the end of my little white sock flopped out like a swollen tongue, fat with freshly squeezed foot juice. My father, who did not do well with blood, made a face and then shot into action. He threw his customer a coin and ordered him to use the payphone on the wall to call the Tucson Medical Center. "Tell him I'm bringing in my son with a smashed foot." This, of course, brought out a fresh torrent of tears from my face as I realized that I was going to be a one-footed weirdo for the rest of my life. My father scooped me up with one arm and rushed me out to the back seat of Bessie Mae Mucho, our 1967 Chevy 2. She had no seat belts, only semi-functional doors, and she smelled of rancid chicken gravy, but my father only paid $75 for her, and she was all ours. My father coaxed Bessie to life and went roaring off through the streets of Tucson. He fished around in the glove compartment as he drove and brought out one of those nifty smash-and-shake ice packs. He handed it back and instructed me to put it on my foot, but I was damned if I was going to even look at my mangled appendage, much less press anything against it. I quietly laid the ice pack near my foot, figuring that would help at least a little bit. We arrived at TMC, and I was taken into the emergency room where they put me on a table and everybody huddled around. The doctor carefully removed my blood-soaked sock, and a wave of nausea rippled through me. My big toe had popped like a grape. The top half hung lazily to one side by a thread of flesh, leaving the bone naked and bloody. They submerged my foot in a big stainless steel bowl full of some cold blue liquid and whispered amongst themselves about what they should do with this poor little boy's toe. After a short while, my mother came rushing in with my sister, who was proudly attired in her official bluebird uniform. My mom, who happened to be a nurse at that very same hospital, consulted with the ER staff for what seemed like a very long time. I could hear their hushed voices, but as much as I tried, I couldn't hear what they seemed to be arguing about. I found out later that my mom was arguing with them because they had already decided they were going to amputate my toe. She explained in her own special mama bear way that there was absolutely no chance in hell they were cutting off any part of her little boy. A surgeon was brought in, and he turned out to be the only other person who actually agreed with my mom. They would do everything in their power to save my mangled digit, and since they were the only two who were on the same page, it was decided that my mom would assist the surgeon with the procedure. So the two of them scrubbed up and began the tedious task of putting me back together again, while my father kept me occupied with the comics section of a newspaper he had found, and my sister told me all about what she and her fellow bluebirds had made out of dry macaroni and glue earlier in the day. After what seemed like forever, the end of my toe was successfully reattached to the end of my foot, and it has been with me ever since. It has a mighty scar running around its circumference and looks a bit like the Elephant Man's head. The toenail grows thick and rigid, and I have to use special clippers to get through it, but I think it's just my body's way of trying to protect its toe from further harm. You know, in case there's ever any other deviant water heaters lurking around any corners. Once again, thank you so much for joining me for this third episode of Storytime with Mr. C. That was The Barbershop Part 3 of Toes and Water Heaters from Father Allen, my collection of stories written about my father. I will be reading you the next story from Father Allen next week, where we will finally step away from the barbershop. So please come on back for that one. That will be available on Sunday, the 27th of July. In the meantime, go check out Ben's podcast, Chasing the Whimsy. Thanks again for hanging out and listening to my story. Hope you come on back for the next one. Until then, take care. Be safe.